This is the story of how a peaceful retiree found himself at the center of a dangerous game when his cozy home accumulated more than just memories. Get ready for an incredible story of resilience, courage. He can't see what's going on under his nose. Of course I'll persuade him. We've persuaded more than one. Everything, according to our scheme. Andrei Borisovich stopped in amazement. There was no doubt, all this applied to him, and said these terrible words, a very polite and nice man. A potential buyer who came with his pregnant wife to look at the house. Only they were not meant for Grandpa, but, apparently, for someone else. And of course they were not said in his presence. And the old man overheard it by chance. And Andrei Borisovich also had a lot of events in his life. To be exact, two, but what? The sale of his own house and the move to a nursing home. And both were suffered, as they say, and very serious. Not everyone can decide to sell the house they grew up in, and there's nothing to say about the nursing home. Who would go there of their own free will, pray tell? But grandfather Andrei made up his mind. Old age, as you know, is of two kinds, happy and unhappy. Intermediate moments are excluded. And everything, of course, depends on the results of life. If you are satisfied with the result you finish, you will live happily. If you are not satisfied, there will be another option. But we should not discount the human factor. A person has nothing, no family, no children, no housing of his own, nothing, and he's happy. Yes, he is, you see, an optimist in life. And an incorrigible one at that. Well, and the opposite option, pessimist, everything is there, only the happiness is not present. Apparently, Andrei Borisovich was that pessimist. And he had everything, two excellent successful children, his own house built by his grandfather, and a beautiful garden. But hell and paradise are in a man's head, as they say, and for a pensioner, even more so. And how many thoughts, and memories too, most of which cause negative associations. And Grandpa also had a feeling of loneliness. His wife died 2 years ago, and his grown-up children and grandchildren lived separately for a long time, coming only on big holidays. No, of course, they often talked on the phone, and the children offered money too. You, Dad, don't be shy, tell me how much you need. The daughter and son were very good indeed, but this did not compensate for the lack of communication with my relatives. It would not seem difficult to drop in on a weekend to visit my father and grandfather. They all have cars. The highway is good, why not? Daddy, some other time. There's no time at all. I'm sorry, we've already agreed with our friends to go to the countryside. You won't be angry, will you? Of course he won't be angry. But over time, Andrei Borisovich began to appear and grow a sense of his needlessness. After all, it is very important for an elderly person to be useful to someone. Yes, that he was always welcome at home. As they say, a person needs little if only they are welcome at home. Yes, to wait and need his advice and as much help as possible, asking to fix the socket and make tea. Yes, just sit next to him. Daddy, I'm so glad that I have you, but Borisic's lucky children always had no time for that. You have to catch luck all the time. And then the military pensioner made a very difficult decision for himself, to sell the hut, as the children called housing, and go to live in a nursing home. The military pension allowed him to choose not just any place, and live the rest of his days in the company of old men and old women. Why not? And he decided to do it without informing the children beforehand. And to stun them afterwards, take it as a fact. And the fact that they will be dumbfounded, there was no doubt. His own daddy and a nursing home? How so? To be honest, there was a certain amount of revenge involved. Yes, for not paying attention to himself. For not needing him anymore. For forgetfulness. A couple of times they even forgot to wish him a happy birthday. It's his father! How could they do that? Then of course, transferred to the card a good amount of money in the form of compensation. Sorry, spinning, but it wasn't the same. And now, a nursing home, it was very difficult to decide to do it. This is where he was born and raised. In this parental house he and his wife have lived lately. The village air had a healing power, and Lita became ill. And it was also not just a house, but a lot of memories. Inheritance and heritage, traditions, and a special atmosphere. Even the air inside was special, and now it was going to be deprived of all that. Besides, Andrei's grandfather didn't get along with people very easily. That's why he was looking for a shelter where he would live in a room alone. There's no telling who you'll end up with in your old age. Then the rest of his life will be spoiled. But the thought that had been conceived had already received due acceleration and began to materialize. One day, a very nice young couple came to look at housing. The wife was in the last month of pregnancy, and the young husband was touchingly supporting her. This reminded grandfather Andre of his youth, when Lita was carrying their firstborn. Before his wife gave birth, they came here for a short stay. The fresh air, silence, and peace were soothing and peaceful. Potential buyers loved it. Oh, it will be so convenient for us to get here. And the river is nearby. Slavik will fish, he's such a fisherman. And in the summer we'll go to the forest. We'll take everything. My husband went to look at the garden and the surrounding area. I trust Slavik completely. The old man began to talk to a pretty young woman who reminded him of his Lita. Elena was interested in everyday details. And then the customer really felt bad. She suddenly turned pale, and drops of sweat appeared above her upper lip. The man laid her down on the sofa, as if she was not going into labor, and ran to fetch water. Boiling water was in the kitchen, the window of which looked out on the opposite side. And then he heard something that was not intended for him at all. The husband who had arrived was talking on the phone, standing in the immediate vicinity of the window. Yes, the usual socialist of those who are for the motherland, for Stalin. But he can't see what's going on under his nose. Of course I'll persuade him. You know our naive pensioners, all according to our scheme. And I've brought along my common wife, Lenka. Who wouldn't believe a pregnant woman? Andrei Borisovich was stunned. All this concerned him. A military pensioner of 74 years of age. And it did not fit at all with what the polite Slavik had said 5 minutes ago. But the latter was showered with compliments and curtsies, and even asked how it had been at the front. And in general, on the fronts in the Great Patriotic War, and whether it was difficult to fight. And he was not at all embarrassed to learn that the war ended in the 45th, and my grandfather was born in the 50th. Although before that he had asked about the age of the cellar, so it was pure bullshit. But then Andrei Borisovich, nothing alarmed, well, confused clapper, modern youth in general, in the head of the mush. But now the pensioner began to suffer vague doubts. It is how you should understand. On autopilot, the grandfather poured water and took it to the pregnant Lenka, taking a sip on the way. He also needed to come to his senses. After all, what he heard he obviously did not like. He was going to shoot. To be exact, not just shoeing, but shoeing in laptops. That was the name of the deception in their village. After all, this urban-type settlement used to be a village. He got Lenka drunk, and she slowly began to come to her senses. And then Slavik came back. He had looked around and liked everything very much. Of course he liked it. Who could doubt it? There was money ahead of him, and very good. But now the grandfather reacted to their words in a completely different way. Borisik had once worked in intelligence, and although he now wanted very much to bring this sweet couple out into the open, he held back for several reasons. First, then the buyers could simply run away, and the man already wanted revenge, or rather alkali and punishment, which the crooks deserved. And secondly, Slavka was much younger and stronger physically. Therefore, in case of what could easily knock the old man on the back of the head, and the pregnant wife could also kick the grandfather at least. Therefore, the clear preponderance of power was not on his side. Suspicions, turning into confidence, were justified. Slavka began to persuade to formalize the sale of the dacha, not at full value, but at cadastral, much cheaper. It's not profitable for us, Borisich. You understand, Lenka is going to have a baby soon. That's a lot of money. Yes, I don't argue, your plot of land is nice, and your house too, but we'll still have to redo a lot of things here. Do you know how much money it'll take? And we'll make up the difference. Merchant's honor. Well, do you agree? And Grandpa agreed, sure guys, everything is just fine. And the joyful kids, having left 200,000 in advance, who wouldn't fall for live money, went home, having secured the former intelligence officer's promises to sign the documents tomorrow. We'll be there at 2 o'clock. Don't go anywhere, Grandpa. The day after tomorrow, at 2 o'clock, Grandpa was at home, of course. His daughter, a lawyer, and a couple of policemen, headed by his son, who worked in the police. In short, a complete gentleman's kit. Welcome. The day before, Grandpa Andre, who tries not to disturb the children unnecessarily, called his daughter. It was an emergency, and she, having clarified the nuances, promised to take the necessary measures. And all these people waiting for the climax in another room came out to the sweet couple. Moreover, not immediately, they gave the buyers who came with a cake to get and spread the documents. And when, in their opinion, the grandfather was ready to sign everything, and then we could start celebrating, all the undesirable witnesses of the deal came out. To be exact, not witnesses anymore. After all, what was going on was clearly an article. The buyers immediately raised a fuss. It was obvious that they were professionals. Slavic began to shout that the grandfather himself had asked for such a deal. Yes, and he, Slavic, by nature very naive and honest, decided to do Grandpa a favor. And he had never even heard the word cadastre. Honestly, and the money doesn't belong to them. It's Grandpa's funeral money, he told me yesterday. The really pregnant common wife started trying to faint, but it was quickly explained to her that pregnancy in no way exempted her from criminal responsibility. And if she wanted to, let her fall, of course, but she would still be arrested. After that, Lenka prudently did not fall. She changed her mind or did not want to. That's all. The police and the swindlers left, taking the guilty to the cold police cells. Yes, by the way, Slavic's fingerprints would later be found on the money. What a nuisance, who would have thought it? And the grandfather and his daughter stayed. And they began to talk, which hadn't happened for a long time. And then by chance it turned out that the daughter is absolutely not against taking Daddy to herself. I just did not think that you have everything so neglected, Daddy. Sincerely amazed, Lyudmila Andreevna. Well, what nursing home, what are you imagining? And this, with living children, how can you not be ashamed? And why didn't you ever say anything? You've never said a word. Me and Yurka, that was my brother's name, thought you were doing well. Why didn't you say anything? Because I'm so proud. How can a former scout complain? I'm not well. Take me away from here for Christ's sake, dear grandfather Konstantin Makarich. And so it turned out the way it turned out. So come on, get ready, her daughter concluded. I'll come back the day after tomorrow, and in the summer you can live here if you want, but don't sell it. Luda left, and grandfather Andrew stood and thought, yes, everything is determined by his majesty of chance. After all, if he hadn't gone to fetch water, everything would have gone differently. And quite likely he, accustomed to trusting people, would have agreed to this contract, having lost a considerable sum. After all, Borisik was indeed that socialist sucker. Slavka was right. So, thank you, unexpected benefactor. And it doesn't matter who you turn out to be, an all-powerful god, a guardian angel, or a retrograde Mercury. And the old man went to pack his suitcases, suddenly noticing that he had lost that very feeling of needlessness. And it was not surprising. After all, they were already waiting for him.